Okay, welcome everyone. We're so thrilled to be here this afternoon. I'm Alice Kim. I direct the Human Rights Lab, which is an initiative of the Posen Family Center for Human Rights. And before we get started, I wanted to welcome Patrick Persley to the stage. Hey Patrick. Patrick is a co-founder of I Am Kid Culture, and a lot of the artwork that you see around the room is artwork that he brought here. So I'm going to have him say a word about that, and then we'll get going.
Just a quick word, while you feast on lunch, hopefully you feast your eyes on artwork, authentic artwork that help develop inmates understand the praxis, understand the social constructs from which we come, evolve, live, and hopefully grow out of. Most of this was done by Charles McLaurin. Look, we actually built I Am Kid Culture in the middle of 2000s while I still had a natural life sentence. I was blessed to write an article that became a state law, signed into effect by our governor before he went to prison. Passed the hat and give him some commissary money. Unless Donald lets him out, Donald might let him out. So thank you for your participation, and thanks for having us.
Quick question.
Yes,
The
sir.
courses for sale.
Well, we have prints, we have websites, imkidculture.org. We have t-shirts here. We raise funds. We actually, this is a mixtape. So I brought this home from prison. As I said, this stuff was used by volunteers from these universities throughout the city in the middle of the 2000s. And it went as far as Rockford, Chicago, Champaign, right? So gang peace circles, that's, you don't get that on your IMDb credentials too often, right? So, and it's done in an authentic way where inmates actually cared about our shorties, right? Hashtag Confessions of a Jail Daddy. Okay, I'm out.
Thanks, Patrick. So I'm Alice Kim, I direct the Human Rights Lab here, and the Human Rights Lab is really all about engaging students and community in human rights practices and human rights work that addresses mass incarceration. And we're really delighted to be able to be presenting this panel to you today. It's part of an effort by the Human Rights Lab and the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture. Last year, we initiated a mass incarceration working group on this campus, and this working group is comprised of faculty, students, community members. We're really thinking and exploring this question of what universities can do to address the social injustices related to mass incarceration. And one of the things I think that universities are uniquely situated to do is to reverse the school-to-prison pipeline and actually create systems of support and begin to build a prison-to-school pipeline. So we have a panel here that's going to be discussing what that might look like, what it is that's currently being done around the country, and what we're trying to do here at the University of Chicago as well. I want to thank the Center for Identity and Inclusion for hosting us here. I know that Robbie Mandava was just here, but I thank him in particular. Also Tracy Matthews, who is a co-convener of the working group, but also an amazing filmmaker and is video recording this panel for us today. And also the staff at the Posen Center, Ashley Pierce, Michael Fisher, Karini Shah is student staff with the Human Rights Lab for helping to organize this lunch. So, part of what the Mass Incarceration Working Group is doing is having short-term residencies where we're inviting experts in the field to come join us here to help us think about these kinds of questions. And Michelle Jones is our first resident. She was here yesterday. She gave really an insightful talk about epistemic injustice and the university, and today's panel is really an extension of that. We're now She provided an analysis for us, and today we're going to be talking about the practice. I am going to quickly introduce each of the panelists, and then we'll begin the conversation. We have, well, I'll start with Michelle, even though she's sitting over there as our guest. Michelle Jones is a scholar and activist whose work excavates the collateral consequences of criminal convictions for people directly impacted by mass incarceration. Michelle is a third-year doctoral student in New York University's American Studies program. She published and presented her research findings during the 20 years she was incarcerated, disrupting assumptions about the reach and intellectual capacity of justice involved women. She's currently working on a book about the history of Indiana's carceral institutions for women in collaboration with fellow incarcerated and formerly incarcerated scholars. We have Reuben Miller here with us, who is an assistant professor in the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. His research examines life at the intersection of race, poverty, crime control, and social welfare policy. Reuben is completing a book titled Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration. We also have Orlando Mayorga, also known as Chili, here with us. Orlando is a restorative justice practitioner and prison abolitionist whose mission is to dismantle the prison industrial complex and put an end to the school-to-prison pipeline. Informed by his 20 years of incarceration in the Illinois Department of Corrections, Orlando currently serves as a re-entry coordinator, mentor, and community anti-violence educator for Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation Community Center. And we also have Michael Fisher, who is the program coordinator for the Posen Center. Michael is an alum of the Masters of Arts program in the Humanities. He was a graduate fellow with the lab last year when he was a student, and now is the program coordinator for the Posen Center, works closely with the Human Rights Lab. He teaches with the Odyssey Project, which is a free 32-week college credit earning humanities program for income-eligible adults with limited or no access to higher ed. So, just to begin this discussion, I wanted to ask each of you to say a word about what a prison-to-school pipeline is. Can you just help define that for everyone who is here? So I will just pass the mic.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming out. It's snowing. Chicago, it snows sometimes in October. My hometown. Still never used to it. So my work has been following formerly incarcerated people over the last 15 or so years. And that work started, I was a volunteer chaplain in Cook County Jail for about 5 years, which led me into doing work in reentry houses, so the ethnography of reentry houses, residential, largely faith-based residential prison reentry organizations in Chicago. So I spent about 3.5 years doing ethnography, checking in, being there, hanging out, going through programs, all the things. And then later to do like community studies. So what does life look like after incarceration for people who go home in Detroit and in New York City and in other places? Anyway, so what I found, to answer the question, is that the most successful organizations are really brokers. So they're brokers of resources. So it's resource-rich social institutions act as bridges for people who've been deprived of resources. And so when I think about a school the pipeline that we're trying or thinking about here, I think about how a university like the University of Chicago can act as a bridge, can be a broker to sort of the life-giving institutions of a free society. And education is one of those life-giving institutions. But that would involve, this is something that Michelle said yesterday, it would involve us to reimagine, this is something like something Michelle said yesterday, it forces us to reimagine what we mean when we think about like the wraparound services and where and when the intervention starts. And so the intervention cannot start just when somebody gets out of prison. It seems like a university would need to have sort of representation in prisons themselves, but also have to have representation in communities, the high incarceration communities where prisons come from, and would operate as a way to bridge resources for people who are resource poor. I don't just mean through services. I mean through education, through promotion, through access to real jobs with a path at the level of the universities. And so it would have to be a holistic understanding of what education is, what education does, and what educational institutions can accomplish.
I think in addition to what Ruben was saying, I once thought of education as simply being transactional, right? Like I'm going to get my education in order to get a good job. But I think when you tie that transactional process to a transformative process that begins with humanizing the person that's being taught, a student, right? I think in order for that humanization process to begin, it has to begin with relationships, right? Between the student, the teacher, but also with other students within that space. I fortunately have been part of a program called the Education Justice Project that provided that space, that nurtured that space, but that also handed, or empowered, I should say, us as students to think about ways that we can further humanize ourselves and each other. So one of the great programs that came about out of the EJP program was CAVE, Community Anti-Violence Education. And it was in this space that we began to uncover a lot of the issues dealing with the school-to-prison pipeline and the trauma that comes from that. The trauma that comes from being raised in single-parent homes or dysfunctional homes, so to speak, and to be there for each other. And in addition to that, to get the academic support from the U of I through the academic courses we're receiving, right? This is what I mean by the transactional process. So transactional being the academic part, but transformative in that we began to understand how our education was to play once we came home, and also the community that we were in, right? Because just because we're in prison, it doesn't mean that we're not a community of people and supportive networks for each other. So our mission and the mission of the 12 original men that came up with this program were out of discussions, right? About how we could address the violence that was happening in Chicago. And then out of those discussions, it wasn't just about Chicago, it was about all communities everywhere. So learning and seeing through a trauma-informed care lens about how we could take our experiences and then transform that experience into affecting those that we had access to, whether it be our nieces, our nephews, whether it be the little brothers on the block once we came home, but also how we could support those that were young people while they were in prison and provide that big brother support that people need in order to navigate the system that we're in. And that's what we did. So when I look at education and when I look to the connection once we come home, I think, like Ruben said, that connection has to begin while people are still incarcerated. That those programs are necessary, are needed, and yet are at only select institutions in Illinois and throughout our nation, right? So we must begin there, and we must try to develop a network of support that connects the individual with those resources before they come home. And thankfully, again, I'm the beneficiary of other brothers that were incarcerated with me who began and started that process for me before I came home. And I always want to make sure to say their names because it's a way of showing respect and honor to those that come before us, right? So Johnny Page and Rob Garrity were the people that kind of paved the way for me to do the work that I'm currently doing in the Backyards neighborhood, because they began the CAVE program out here. And understanding that CAVE, again, is not just for formerly incarcerated people, but for all people, because we all suffer from some form of trauma, or we're all survivors of some form of trauma. And it's through that peer-led support that I believe that those of us who have, in many ways, hurt people, right? We hear that saying, hurt people, hurt people. But I think now what we're beginning to hear is that healed people can also heal people. And I think that's where we need to find that bridge and continue that bridge so that we can be better servants to the community that we're serving and wherever we are. And of course, education is a key element in that. But I do believe that it must begin first with relationships, with connection, and then transactional process that feeds into their transformative process, because I believe for those of us that have been incarcerated for long periods of time, we understand the impact that we have as children, as adolescents, as juveniles. And now as adults going through that transformative process, we understand that it's our responsibility to make sure that we give back and that we begin to heal as a way of giving back and be able to provide that healing for others.
I would echo everything that's come before. And I think what I would add is that in that process of building programs that are designed to provide a red thread, a through line for incarcerated students to come out and finish and re-enter and be holistic and have a whole life, none of that would work if it wasn't set on a foundation in which all parties, faculty, administrators at the university, co-students, and Department of Corrections began to look at incarcerated students as people. And that whole process of humanizing actually has to start with a lot of training and a lot of awareness building and a lot of coalition building and a lot of building of allyship and relationships, as you said, because it goes against the grain of legislatures, some DOC commissioners, some people who are running guards, et cetera, to ascribe personhood to the incarcerated person, period. And then they look at the incarcerated scholar as someone who is trying to milk the system, trying to get over, and trying to be manipulative, and they create all these extra rules around numbers of pieces of papers and books, et cetera, because they're trying to infuse and inject the carceral state even into the process of education as far as it could go, down to the number of paper clips, et cetera. So I would say that a prison-to-school pipeline must begin very much about coalition building, and that is designed to re-inscribe, reapply, to reclaim for the incarcerated student personhood. Because it won't work otherwise, because the next commissioner will come in and change and flip, and the next officer will come in on the dorm and flip. But if we actually build that sort of, it's sad that we have to call it progressive, but that's what I would call it, that kind of progressive thinking, then it will survive culturally. It will survive the waves and the vagaries of changes in staff and administrations. Because you've got to think about the long haul. In my work, I think about the person who has yet come to prison. And then what are we doing now to make sure that those programs and everything that we're thinking up and everything that we're applying is sustainable for the next person. And of course, with an abolitionist perspective, I want there not to be a need for that thinking. However, as I talked about last night, in terms of providing assistance to the human being right now, I don't deny that we need to do that. We need to build that kind of relationships. I think about the access that we had in the Indiana Women's Prison, and it was mostly because we had a superintendent who, through a lot of work, began to ascribe personhood. And suddenly, they weren't tripping about video conferencing and Skyping out of the facility. They weren't tripping about publications. They weren't tripping about visiting scholars using the same equipment that hearings went through, right? To now let Khalil Gibran Muhammad, screen in and talk to us. But it required years of building relationship. And I think a lot of people say, well, they should just do it because it's just the right thing to do. But they have actually been taught to think of us as the enemy, to think of us as unworthy, to think of us as not deserving of these things. And so we actually have to work as hard to reprogram those human beings. And that kind of investment in time, a lot of people are not thinking about. And so the other side of the prison, the prison to school pipeline is then self-definition of the actual scholar. There are a lot of people who still ascribe to say certain terms of inmate and offender, and they still see themselves a certain way. There's a lot of work that has to happen with the student themselves, working through the issues that brought them to their case and their situations. Some of us, particularly women, are dealing with trauma. Trauma that we have inflicted, trauma that's been inflicted upon us. People are trying to deal with their addictions. People are trying to deal with sexual identity that's not been affirmed and targeted. And so the student themselves, a prison school pipeline has to focus on the student. And really, and more than saying, look, I brought in card making, you should be glad. Oh, we made something, we did a program, or we offered, I taught you, you had a class, you had an experience, you should be grateful. The orientation about what that program looks like has to be oriented from the perspective of the student, of the incarcerated being. Otherwise, then you are doing a same thing, top-down, elitist, I am the teacher, and I will provide you with the education, and you are, and a sort of sterile clinical orientation. The student experience, based on all the stuff that's come before, the level of trauma that's come before, you must change how you teach. And you gotta be open to listening to the students and how they are presenting their challenges to you in the classroom and responding to that. Now, does that mean you dumb down your courses? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because again, you provide a disservice to that student when she gets out or he gets out and he can't compete at the university. He can't keep up with his coursework. He can't keep up with his assignments, or she can't follow through because you didn't teach him the 5-paragraph essay method, and you didn't teach him how to take notes, and you decided that you're going to be charitable by giving them not the same rigorous education that you would have provided to a student on campus. It's a disservice. And so the orientation of the student is critical so that your program or your ideas, your plans for a prison to school pipeline is well informed.
I think the one thing I would add to what everyone has said in different ways is that, to me, a key characteristic of a prison to school pipeline is a system of resources that has consolidated and organized itself half as well, at least, as the carceral state already has, right? The interesting thing about the system is the only reason that it works is because the system is fighting you as a monolith, and you are fighting it as an individual. If every single person walked into court tomorrow and pled not guilty, the system would collapse in like 6 hours. The only reason it continues to function the way it does is because everyone goes up against it on their own. Plea deal is the only safe thing to do because the maxes are so high now. And so what is it, 98, 99% of cases get pled out. So the state is organized on their end. They know exactly what they're doing. But then everyone that's coming into contact with the carceral state is trying to fight for their individual life in a way that that plays exactly into their hands. So when you think about, you walk out of the court, they don't say the prosecutor versus you. They don't even say, oh, this court versus you, this county versus you. It is the people of the state of Illinois versus your single solitary ass. And what we don't want to have had, and so to me, the key about a prison to school pipeline is creating a system that does not replicate that same division, where you feel like it's everyone versus you, where you walk onto a campus and say, damn, this is the university, the people, the provost, dean's office, and students of the University of Chicago versus me. And why wouldn't you feel that way if when you come on the campus, there's no support group for you, there's no visibility for your interests, there's no people that, it's not something you just feel like you can talk about, you might lose your placement, all these type of things. There's no housing assistance. And so, the reason why me and Orlando know each other, by the way, is because we both went through the same degree program at Northeastern Illinois. And we first got in touch because he saw my name as listed as the president of a student group they have at NEIU called Formerly Incarcerated Standing Together, FIST, which is a group of formerly incarcerated students and their allies on the campus, which gives that group of people some kind of visibility. So when you're looking to go back to school and you look up NEIU, you see, oh, there's a community for me here. Like, I'm not going to be alone here. So he knew he could reach out to me. He said, hey, I'm thinking about going back to school. Now he's a graduate of that program, hopefully going to be here in the fall, next fall. that's amazing. That's what that looks like when we talk about relationships. But, how would he have known who to contact? How would he have known there were people out on that campus that would help him if there isn't something like a FIS, something, some kind of organization that he can look to, where he knows it's not just, it's not just the university and then you alone. So yeah, I think that consolidation of resources on our side, like half as well as the state has already done, is a really crucial part of this puzzle.
Thanks. I'm really hearing what all of you have said, especially about relationships and the need to build relationships, and also about the question of visibility. I teach at Stateville Prison, which is a maximum security prison for men, and the stigma that is associated with incarcerated scholars is real. And I teach with a teaching collective called the Prison Neighborhood Arts Project. And for us, one of the important things is it's not just about going into the prison and offering classes. It's about building relationships with those who are inside. It's also about creating platforms so that people who are incarcerated are so isolated from the rest of the world, and they're essentially disappeared, and it's very easy not to pay attention to what is happening either at Cook County Jail, where Ruben was chaplain, or in Joliet, or at Logan, or Decatur, or down south. These prisons are hidden away. So the other artwork that you see around here was created by students who are taking art classes at Stateville. So you see self-portraits that students created, and other artworks that students created to visualize and provide a way of understanding what, in particular, long-term incarceration and long-term sentencing looks like. So I hope that folks will take a moment to take a look at the artwork that you see around. I guess I want to ask both Orlando and Michael and to talk a little bit about FIST, and then Michelle to talk about Unlock Higher Ed. And if you could talk specifically about what are the kinds of systems of support that we need to develop on our campus and across universities.
Yeah, so FIST, like I said, formerly incarcerated, standing together, student group at Northeastern Illinois University, and it's a student group that's very closely attached to what they have there called the non-traditional degree program, which has both, can grant degrees inside. The PNAP granted a couple degrees, 8 degrees in Stateville for the first time in a really long time recently, but also has a contingent on campus of folks that are coming back as either formerly incarcerated students or just what they term non-traditional students in some way. Usually folks that are older, folks that are coming back to school after a long break, kind of different situations that because they're not the typical age or background of a university student. And it's really, we organize some good events on the campus, but to be honest, the main point of it existing was just to kind of have that visibility, like have a flag planted, so that when people came on the campus, like they knew there was people that they could reach out to. There's this interesting, as a formerly incarcerated student, one of the interesting things is that people assume, because of the same stereotypes of what people think someone coming out of a prison is like in terms of like who they are, what they're capable of or not capable of. For those same reasons, there's a baseline assumption on most college campuses that there are no formerly incarcerated students around. Because A, they haven't heard about any, and B, formerly incarcerated students can't go to college. They're not smart enough, and we know if they were here, they'd be killing us. Right? They'd be stealing my stuff. Like that's how I know if they were here. And the saddest thing about this exact campus here is I can tell you as a student that was here and met folks on this campus, the formerly incarcerated students on this campus, not only are they here, they're not just like getting by. Like not only are they here, they're succeeding, they are exceptional students on this campus. They're leading, their divisions. They're doing incredible work, incredible research. they're deeply involved in the campus. And it's sad that for so many, they don't feel like they can kind of let that part of their identity be known.